Motivation is just what gets us to do what we want to do. And it's that simple. And the realization that I've come to is that everyone is motivated. Everyone is already motivated. And if you don't know the effects of motivation in your life, look at your life. Because you see, I think there's what we might call positive motivation and negative motivation. That is motivation that moves you to do things that add value to your life, to the lives of others, to the context within which you live. And then there's motivation that kind of extracts it, or at the very best is just neutral, normal, does nothing. You say, well, how can that be motivation? That's to get you moving. Well, a lot of people need to get moving or want to get moving to do nothing. Or they get so busy, they're moving in so many different directions that nothing results as a result of that. Is to be busy all the time. Think about that. Doesn't that grab you? Now, no one can be motivated. And yet, I think everyone is self-motivated to some extent. You see, we always do what we would rather do than not do. And boy, would I argue with this at various times in my life. We always tend to do what we would rather do than not do. Every action that we take is some kind of a personal response or reaction to something that's going on in our life to fill some kind of a need or a desire. I think the point that we have that we want to make with something like this is that sometimes we can push ourselves to the point, be motivated to do something that grows out of an obsessive compulsive desire to accomplish things and compromise ourselves. And I'm not talking about that, but I think it's wonderful to be motivated, to have whatever that is in us that is some kind of a response to life to fulfill some kind of a need. How do we motivate ourselves positively? We know the negative motivations. We've seen those things. They're usually involved in avoidance and fear and that kind of stuff. But how do we motivate ourselves positively? Well, I think positive self-motivation begins with a transformation of our attitude or a change of our attitude. And our attitude is a combination of various elements. It's what we think, what we feel, what we do, how we behave, how these all come together to give us an attitude that allows us to be clearly focused on something important in our life and then to apply that. But in being motivated to do something, we need to be convinced, I think, that the benefits that are going to come as a result of what it is we want to experience far outweigh the price that we're going to pay for it. And that makes sense in civilization. The time when we finally overcome anything to which we are attached is the time when we are free, we are open. Then we can move into a full sense of the reality of who we are, which are each one of us is a God-child made in the image and likeness that made everything else. But setting that aside, you may not like that broad categorization of you, but the change in lives come when we realize that the cost is just too great. You see, this change of attitude, the change of awareness, it sets us on a more useful course, a more positive course. And one of the problems is we get into, and I talked a little bit about this last week, we get into classifying our behaviors as good or bad. And that traps us. Classifying things as good or bad, oftentimes this causes us to avoid whatever the issue is about which we're making that judgment. You see, if we look at something, say, in ourselves as this is bad, then what we've done is we don't want to associate with that is bad. And so it's like we encapsulate it over here and it doesn't get dealt with. If we just change the terminology that we use to examine whatever the incidents are in our life. Like, for instance, the terms I used last week. Stop looking at things as good and bad and think of useful and non-useful. That which adds value and that which maybe doesn't or extracts value. Do you see the difference there? Because to think in terms of useful or non-useful does not have a moral connotation associated with it, where bad or good does. You are morally okay. You are not morally okay. That creates such a separation. But this is useful and this is not useful. Now this allows us to look at what's going on. And you know, what you do, what you observe may be faulty. Maybe all kinds of mistakes that are involved in this. But there's the realization also that I, as a person, am okay. So I made a mistake. So what? And as you begin to understand this, you can extend that same kind of consideration to other people. And it becomes so much easier to be able to evaluate situations clearly and look at the positive and the negative of it from a standpoint of not good or bad, but what is useful and what is not useful, what adds value, what doesn't add value. And out of that comes a kind of self-motivation, that something that gets you to move toward that which it is you want to experience in your life. And the reason that it leads to this kind of self-motivation is that shorn of the judgments that we so often carry with us, we begin to see that there's meaning and purpose in virtually everything that we do. And that gives you focus. One of my favorite 5-letter words, focus. Now, another part of all this is another word that is a problem to some people. And that word is the responsibility. Have you ever heard that word before? You see, is truly taking responsibility for your life. And oftentimes if you categorize things in the manner that I was talking about, good or bad, evil or not evil or whatever, it's hard to move in to the kind of responsibility that you need, where you own it, then you can deal with it. But a lot of times that allows you to just separate yourself from it. You create avoidance mechanisms. But in this taking of responsibility, first of all, you have the right and the responsibility to choose what you want to do with your life. I'm allowed to make mistakes in my life. You know, I can scream and I can cuss and I can steal and I can cheat. Or on the other hand, I can help, I can support, I can be there to help uplift people and encourage them. And I can change my mind in any of this. That's the choice. I can change my mind and do something else. And this is the divine gift of choice. It's always mine. It's always yours. And you know something? It'll not always be right. In other words, you're going to make mistakes. You have that divine gift. You're going to make mistakes. But what you do and what you experience out of this is only going to be flawless, let's say, or free of mistakes, or right at your present level of awareness. And when I say that, when I talk about awareness in this sense, I'm talking about the degree to which you are aware of the truth of who you really are. Your true nature, that image likeness of God that you are, and the implications of that. And the more we get an insight in the possibilities, the unlimited possibilities that are there for us, grow in awareness of that, the more we can begin to draw those into our life simply by being aware of them. Isn't that amazing? Bemoaning the fact that we made a mistake. Mistakes are wonderful if you use them. Mistakes provide us the opportunity to be able to wake up, to expand our awareness, to be able to release a lot of the emotional resistance and the suppressed stuff that we hold on to so much, like guilt and self-blame, those kinds of things. You own it. Take responsibility for it and move on. We're never going to be fully free until we accept full responsibility for our life and our actions and bring into play some self-forgiveness. And this means responsibility for every word, every thought, every deed, every decision, every action that we've taken. You know, we're going to pay the price for those things or reap the benefits for every one of them. And we learn and we grow according to the nature